Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Bassett, and I'm a composer, and I want to show you how to use Counterpoint creatively in your compositions. I hope that you use Counterpoint. In my opinion, it is the absolute key to composition. If you don't use it, I highly recommend learning it and utilizing it in your compositions. For me, when I finally learned how to do it, my compositions took off and were better than I ever could do before. And I really believe that will happen for you as well if you don't use it already. And if you are using it, then I hope this will help you to stretch the limits of the counterpoint that you already use. So what I have here is my suite number 5 for clarinet and continuo. You can watch that video on my channel. The score is shown and it's a live performance, so you can follow along with the whole thing. And I want to show you the first line of that, how I went about composing it, and how I used counterpoint to uh, create something beautiful and interesting. So the pieces in A minor, we have clarinet here in concert pitch. We have the harpsichord part, and I'm showing that as a convenience. Normally, when I would, have a finished product of my music, it would not show the harpsichord part. It would just have the bassoon line with the figured bass on it. But just to help see the chords and everything, I'm putting the whole realization on here. So um, when I composed the piece, I had this idea in my head, this pulsing three three notes, well, four really, because it ends on the half note. And I thought I wanted it to have a strong sound to it. So of course, when you want something to sound strong, you have 1 5 1, and that's what I did with the melody. I put the melody to the fifth, and I decided I wanted to continue that. Well, that's not what I did in my piece. Let me change that. Okay. So then I have to decide, how am I going to harmonize this? Do I want to just do right what the clarinet is doing, 1 5 1 5? Well, I could, but that's not interesting. It can be interesting sometimes, but I wanted this to be special. So when I do counterpoint, I think options. That always goes through my head. What are my options? I think counterpoint is actually extremely free thing. It's not constricting. Some people think it's all these rules that constrict you, but I actually think it opens the door for many more possibilities because it focuses your brain what to be thinking on and how you can um, expand on the existing system. So I decided that for the first, um, you know, measures or the first round of this, that I did want to use the 5 chord. But I don't want to double the clarinet and just jump to the same note because that's not interesting. So I went down to a G sharp. I put it in first inversion. Before I put that there, I talked about options. So what would go through my head is, all right, I could have an E, I could have a C, I could have a G, or I could have an A. And those are the options according to Counterpoint because you want the intervals 1, 3, 5, 6, or 8. Those are the best. And if you're thinking, first species, one note against one note, which is what I'm doing. So the nice thing about counterpoint is that sharps and flats don't matter. They don't count, towards a third. A third is a third. It doesn't matter if it's flat, sharp, whatever. It's a third. The only reason it matters is because it changes the way it sounds. So, you have to decide whether it matters or not. It has to make sense, but it will work from a contrapuntal perspective, and you can make quite a bit of things work. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my G sharp, And now I decided that I want this to be very interesting. So I'm going to use a different option that I have, which would be G natural, because it doesn't matter. I can have either the G sharp or the G natural. It's just up to me to make that fit. So for me as a composer, there are things that I like. I like chromatic lines. I also like trying to sustain the same pitch over a lot of measures somehow, whether that's an inner voice or a pedal tone or whatever. But I like those two things, chromatic lines and keeping the same pitch. So um, here I have the starting of a chromatic line: A, G sharp, G natural. So then I thought, okay, is it possible to continue this chromatic line? Well, if I put a G flat, no, because that's not good counterpoint. But I could call that an F sharp. And now F sharp is a third away. So perfect, we can do that. And then can I continue the pattern and put an F natural? Yes, because it's still a third. It doesn't matter. And then, of course, if I go down another half step, of course I can have an E. We already have an E. So now the trick is I have to make all this work. I have to make it sound, great, like it belongs, like it goes together. So I'm going to copy this into the harpsichord. And now I have to decide how I'm going to harmonize this. Um, so real quick, I want to point out here we have an octave, octave, sixth, sixth, third, third, octave. And what I just pointed out, if you're confused, I pointed out the interval between the clarinet and the bassoon. So again, we have 8, 8, 6, 6, 3, 3, 8, 8. So that is wonderful counterpoint. Didn't use any dissonances. It's all just right out of the textbook counterpoint. And it also is contrary motion, which is right out of the textbook. The bass is descending, the treble is ascending. So we have contrary motion as well. So now I have to decide, how am I going to harmonize this? How am I going to make this work? Well, pretty obvious, I think, this case. We have a G sharp and we have an E, and we're in the key of A minor, so this is a 5 chord. I'm just going to harmonize this. I'm not going to worry too much about voice leading. I'm just going to kind of throw things in. One little tip, if you don't already know this, whenever you have first inversion, you want to avoid putting that third degree, scale degree, you want to avoid putting that in any of the harmony or in the melody. I wouldn't say that's an absolute rule, because Bach in particular, you can find all types of doubled thirds, but it's good to avoid it. And especially if you're starting out, it'll help you to avoid it at first. So I told you that when I write music, I like to have chromatic lines and I like to keep the same notes. So I'm going to keep the same thing. I'm going to take E major and I'm going to make it E minor. And that way I get to keep these same pitches here. Okay? So now I am at this, this is the first difficult thing I think to harmonize here. This was easy and obvious, but now we have an F sharp. It's outside of the normal A minor. Well, melodic minor, sure, but that's not a common harmonization. So I have an A and I have an F sharp. So I have to think options. This could be D major. This could be F sharp minor. This could be a diminished 7 chord in E minor if we have a D sharp. So D sharp, F sharp, A would make that a diminished 7 chord. Plenty of other things if we got into other 7 chords. So I decided that I want to try again to keep the same pitch somewhere. And through my, thinking, trial and error of options, I kept an E. So then I had to think, okay, how can I make an E, an F sharp, and an A work? And the answer is an F sharp minor 7 chord is how that all fits together. So what I need to add to this is a C sharp. And I'll just double another F sharp here. Whoops. There we go. So now this is F sharp minor because we have F sharp, A, C sharp, and I added the 7th, E natural. So this is an F sharp minor with an added 7th to it. So now I have to set up for my cadence. Okay, this was pretty obviously a half cadence. While I like to be creative and interesting, I do like to be obvious sometimes as well. That kind of helps the music hold together and keep making it memorable and driving it forward when you do put in some obvious things. So I'm going to just go ahead and put in E major, my 5 chord. So now I have an A, I have an F natural, and I need to get that to the 5 chord. So I immediately start thinking of predominance. This could be very easily a 4 chord in first inversion, but I thought that that was not colorful enough for me. So I thought, well, what else can I do with an F natural going to an E? And I thought of an augmented 6 chord. And because I have this A here, I'm set up perfectly for the Italian augmented 6 chord. And all you need for that is a D sharp. Now, technically speaking, in the soprano voice is where you would put the D sharp, and in the bass voice you would have the F. But this is my composition. Technically, you can do whatever you want. So that's what I did. I put a D sharp in my figured bass, originally, which if you watch the video, you'll see the figured bass there. So I'm just going to put it here in the realized part. And that's just a doubled A. And then we have that. So let's hear what it sounds like. And that's it. So again, we've got chromatic line. We've got an E running throughout here. I did have to drop it there, but it came back here. We've got 1, 5, 1, 5, which is really common sound that your ear will just grab right onto. And we've also got great counterpoint. We have octave, sixth, third, octave. So I hope that this helps you to be more creative with your counterpoint. And again, think of options whenever you're doing counterpoint. And don't be afraid to really stretch those options. They may not work in one particular composition because of the character and style of it, but you might discover something and just file it in your brain for a future composition. That happens to me quite a bit. Again, I encourage you to learn counterpoint if you don't know it already. If you were totally lost this whole time, then really you got to learn your counterpoint. It's essential. So again, I hope that this helped in some way. Thank you.